Welcome to the UK's first metal detection podcast. It's All Metal Mode UK with your host from across the pond, Mr. Michael Hare.
Hey everybody, this is Mike Hare, and you're listening to the All Metal Mode UK podcast with my super amazing host, Mr. Dave Sadler. Hey, I didn't forget your name in the middle of that, Dave. Can you believe that? Wow, that's...
Oh, you're on about me, super host. What's that about? I think you've been drinking moonshine already, have you?
Right. No, I'm good. Before we get started, I'd like to say check out North of Tyne Detecting. They've been, Scotty B's been sharing All Metal Mode UK podcast over there, and we're going to do the same. I've been over there looking at what they're doing, and a nice Facebook group, Scotty. So, yeah, we are still getting feedback. What is going on?
I've indeed. Apologies for the feedback. Mike is working on it. He has been for about the past 5 minutes or so.
Steve,
how are you this week? Anyway, Michael.
I am good. I'm doing okay. We've I don't know if I told you this. I know I didn't tell you. I don't know if you've seen it though, but I've got Greg Weems out of the United States. He's going to help me set up like what Luke does for us, schedule people in, find people for the U.S. shows and stuff. So I'm really excited for that. It's a lot of work. You know, that's really where the hard stuff is, and Luke's really behind the scenes makes this work good and go smooth, and we sure appreciate that. Steve, hey, let's real quick, Steve, can you try unplugging your let's go back to how we were originally. Let's see if it's on your end, because I don't think we were getting that at the beginning, were we, Dave?
I don't think so.
We'll give that a try for a little bit. No, why am I getting such bad feedback?
Yeah, it sounds all clear at my end, guys.
Okay, well, let's give it a try and see. Can you hear it, Dave?
Yeah, still there. I'm just trying to see if there's any extra electrical items on near me, and apart from the computer and the monitor, there's nothing else of consequence locally to me. So
yeah, same here that I know of.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Shall we crack on? And you tell you what, Mike, we'll crack on. You have a play, and I'll introduce our guests this evening and whatnot.
All righty, let's do. There's really nothing else I can do on my end unless I shut down and completely reboot my computer. Is the only other thing I'd know to do. I've already restarted everything, so let's give it a go. Hopefully, we can get through this and we do okay.
Okie dokie. Well, ladies and gentlemen, listeners of all varieties, tonight's guest is a very good friend of mine for the past 20 years. One of my closest friends, in fact, Stever Mera. And Steve has been, well, myself and Steve had quite a lot of adventures years ago. Steve founded the Phenomena magazine, which is now probably the biggest of its type in the world, as it's, and Steve will tell us more about how many different languages that's published in. And Steve's gone on since I stopped working with Steve a number of years ago as I left the subject, and Steve's gone up bigger and bigger to far bigger things, some which we're going to be talking about tonight, and his future is very bright. So good evening, Stephen. How are you?
No, what an introduction. Thank you, guys. That's an absolute pleasure to be on.
It's a pleasure to have you.
Yes, we've certainly a few stories over the years.
We have. We won't talk about me falling asleep on anything.
Let's not mention that.
No, we won't. So anyway, Steve, it's better for yourself to introduce yourself than it is for me. Obviously, you know what you'd like to say. So can you give us a brief introduction about yourself?
Absolutely, yeah. I started in the subject of the unexplained about 36 years ago now. after spending 5 years independently, currently doing investigations, I started working for corporate companies. Spent about 15 years doing corporate investigations of a confidential basis, basically. And some of that involved working with the police. There was a case from the CID in London, city councils, hotels, football grounds, you can pretty much name it. Just after strange things, strange occurrences. Sometimes they needed assistance, sometimes they just needed guidance. A lot of companies didn't want bad media, of course, because of the content of this material. And of course, we moved on, joined with Dave many years back. We conducted a lot of different types of investigations around the country. Some of them were very fascinating. Some of them had a lot of mundane explanations, but we were there to give as rational explanations as we possibly could. And I think that was what was so different about the work that we did, because we really went in there to try and rationalise cases. And there were the odd ones that we just could not find a rational explanation for. And those ones which have stayed with us for many years. We've been involved working with people overseas. And of course, we've been involved in a television series, as David's mentioned before, Ghost Cases, which was working with Paul Kimball, who's quite well-known filmmaker, and Holly Stevens. And then, of course, they came over and we did some filming with them for quite some time. I also own a magazine known as Phenomena Magazine, which is currently, I think it started off as an in-house magazine, really, didn't it, Dave? And then
that was it. But I sent it out to a few people, and they were like, "Oh, we want more." So we discussed it, and you launched it in full. Then, yeah,
we did. Yeah, I mean, it's still going out every month, free of charge, and it's come on leaps and bounds over the years. And because like at the end of the day, what we wanted to do is distribute information for free. Yeah, absolutely. That word free. You don't hear it very often. And this is why it's probably done so well. And as time's gone on, we've expanded into numerous different languages in 12 countries with 1.9 million subscribers to the magazine. It's forever growing, to be honest with you, because it's just about networking, keeping people up to date with different things from around the world. We have a very good team. We have independent editors in different countries doing their own language versions of this. So it's a very controlled situation. And we produce a magazine every month rather than a bi-monthly one. We wanted to make sure keep people up to date on a regular basis. Seems to have come on leaps and bounds. And of course, we are just at that point in time now when we're due to have a complete new face for the magazine. It's going through some changes and hopefully better produced, and should be available with its new look around about March. So it's all very exciting at the time. Of course, I've moved on, as Dave said, to international lecturing, television, and radio. I do as much as I possibly can, but I have been involved in a number of very high projects in the UK as well as overseas as well. So it's been very busy. Very busy time.
Hey, Steve, real quick, pre-show I told you it all really fascinates me. I would say I'm open to the possibilities, but I'm a skeptic on everything. So you started off in paranormal, correct?
I started off in the ufological field, actually, and I spent quite a number of years. 1983 I started. And then I moved into the paranormal field because there's a lot of correlation between the people who have those type of experiences with UFOs and the paranormal. So kind of to get a full understanding about what people are seeing, you got to understand how the brain works. So I did a little work in parapsychology as well. Just gain a better understanding. And to be honest, the whole concept just fascinated me from day one.
I would like, if you don't mind, share with us one of your, if some of the in the paranormal, because you and Dave did that together, correct, guys?
Yeah, for a number of years. And if you're going to ask him about one of his experiences,
I want to hear.
I can guarantee I know which one it is straight away.
I want to hear some of your craziest experiences. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to jump to the chase and. I want to hear.
Well, I mean, guys, when I came into the subject initially, I was very skeptical. Very skeptical. I came across it came at it like in a scientific manner, because for me it was, there's got to be a lot of icing on the cake. There's got to be a lot of things which are hoaxes and frauds. And believe me or not, it's actually true. There is a lot of that out there. And of course, I only believe a pinch of what you might read or see on the internet. But the truth accounts do last. And of course, for me, I've just been in the right place at the right time. I'm sure that there was a particular investigation I did on behalf of Rochdale City Council, which is a city council based over here in the UK, which were having some problems with the tenants, which were living in a small single-storied home, which is referred to as a bungalow over here. And they were having some disturbances. And I went in there because the council couldn't find any explanations for unusual outpourings of water, of all things. And it went across the headlines. The Rochdale City Council getting some real bad press about it. The tenants were upset. They'd gone to the press. And, of course, it just captured my imagination. So, of course, I offered my services to them. I said, well, one way or another, I'll be able to conclude if this is a fake case, you could just want to be rehomed, or if there's any truth to the matter. Immediately upon arriving, I realised that a local vicar had been to the location, which I had the opportunity to interview. And as a Catholic vicar, within the first 5 minutes, he turned around to me and said, "Oh, it's I believe they've got a poltergeist." And I was a bit awestruck, to be honest with you. I didn't expect, caught me on the hop, really. I didn't expect to hear that straight away come from a priest's mouth. I thought, well, okay, he's convinced that something's going on, what's really happening. And of course, we went in there for an investigation, and there was outpourings of water just coming from the ceiling, appearing on doors. The house had a very musty smell because of water damage. Things were covered over with plastic. And the council had gone in and they could not find any rational explanation for where this water was coming from. In fact, this was during August of 1996, I believe, and it was a heat wave in the UK. Now, it doesn't happen very often. Usually summer's on a Tuesday. And as you can imagine, that we've got this heat wave. It hadn't rained for the last 8 weeks. It was around about 92 degrees. And water was still coming into the home. Now, there's only one way water can come into a home if it's not been raining, and that is by the actual water pipes coming in. However, there was no water system, no pipes, no tanks, or anything in the attic or loft, should we say, that could cause this water to appear on the ceilings. And we took some samples. We had it analysed by Northwest Water Laboratories, and they came back to us and said there was a significant difference between this not being tap water. Well, that was it for us. We were stumped. Absolutely no idea where this water was coming from, how it got in. And on one occasion, we actually saw this water forming on the ceiling, and it kind of intelligently moved across the ceiling and around a light fitting. I'd never seen anything like it before. In fact, I was so transfixed with what I was seeing, I was even forgetting to take a photograph as the camera was hanging round my neck. And I was had to be prompted to take photographs because I was doing all of this. I'd never seen anything like it before. As the progression of that investigation continued, there was some audible phenomena, some strange sounds occurring, objects being moved and then suddenly appearing from nowhere. And on one occasion, I actually got thumped in the back. And it lifted me across the room a good 4 feet. Now, when Dave said, remember a particular case, well, this is what really does stay with me because I've never experienced that before. I haven't experienced that since. It's probably something I wouldn't want to experience again. And I remember thinking to myself at that time, as I was running out of the house, that I maybe ought to change my profession. And that was the first thing that went through my mind. Honestly, guys, I thought that was it for me. I don't want to get involved in this. Whatever this thing is, whatever it was, it lashed out. And I was a big guy. It took a lot to shift me 4 feet across the room. And I'm on top of a kind of a small dressing table. But as I cast my mind back, and at that time, it was like I've been an electrical engineer earlier in my life. And as anybody will tell you who's done electrical engineering, they have had the odd shock. They've crossed wires, they've got a belt. And what happens is that you get this repelling feeling, this being pushed away. And that's exactly how it felt. It felt like a physical punch and an electric shock at the same time. I was left with the bruises for a good 3 weeks afterwards. But at that time, I had no explanation for it. Eventually, we had the family relocated. We had to, even though the family didn't want to, they were happy there, living there for 14 years. We had to have them relocated. And the house was eventually boarded up for just about 12 months and void of any electricity in the home, in hope of that this thing would just basically disappear. We took control of the situation, the witnesses, making sure that there was no negative press, because the actual housing wanted to continue to rent this home at some stage. So we kind of took control of the whole situation. The family moved into another home and within a few days, the phenomenon returned. It followed them for about 5 or 6 weeks, and then it kind of just fizzled out. I believe the family are happy now and all is well, but it was a part of their life that they probably won't forget in a hurry. And I certainly won't forget, because I've never experienced that before. And to be honest, guys, I don't think I'd want to experience that again.
See, I told you which one he'd do. I knew he'd say that one. And Steve's also written a book based on that account as well. Am I right, Steve?
Yes, the Roswell Poltergeist. Yes, it's available in Spanish, English, and Japanese, apparently now, from what I've been told.
And if you put that in Amazon, or is it available via?
Yeah, the Roswell Poltergeist. It's available on Amazon in Kindle format and in book format. It's a very popular book because it's just one small book, and it's right to the point. It's about all the things we experienced there that we just could not rationalise. There are some things we managed to, such as a couple of unusual noises which were coming from sort of next door. But the rest of it, absolutely not. No explanations for it. And of course, we managed the situation so well that we ended up on some database for Manchester's. In the UK, we had a network, a location known as the. It was like a business centre that helps companies around the country. We ended up on that, and that kind of pushed us forward to help other companies. There was all of a sudden an outlet for someone to be able to contact an organisation on a confidential basis to try and assist with such matters. And we've been involved in quite a number of high-profile cases.
That is very cool. I'm not going to go into detail, but I actually, without a doubt, lived in a house that was haunted, and I mean, so many things were going on that I was writing it down and stuff. It was almost daily, and I'm a pretty rational person, and there were so many things I couldn't find an answer for. It got out of control, and some really weird and strange and bad things happened, and so I know, and I've always been interested in that, but when I tell that story, people are like, "Oh, that's really cool," and it's like, not when you live there. Believe me, when when you live with it, it was it turned into a very stressful time in my life, very overwhelming with everything that was going on, and I would say, to the point possibly poltergeist or something. I mean, I used to have a candle, a big round. This is the only story I'll tell. I get off. I can talk a lot, Steve, so I apologize, but I'll make this short. I had a big, 3-inch round, 4-inch tall candle that sit in a candle holder at the very back of my dresser in my bedroom, and it sat in there flat. It didn't squeeze in. It didn't, and any way for it to fall, it had to hit the dresser. It could fall over. I mean, certainly that could be explained. On 2 different occasions, it literally flew out and hit the bed about 3. I measured it at one time. I think it was 3.5, 4 foot away. Never touched the dresser and hit the bed. Things like that were happening. I mean, that's just a short, quick story. But so, yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of after that, you find out so many people are interested in paranormal and are like, oh, well, live it for a bit, and it's not so cool. Not right. So cool when you don't know how to handle it and stuff. But that's great that you guys did that, and I think I'm sure you guys explained a lot of stuff off, right, or made them comfortable with it and understood that there's more to it than just that's. We did,
yeah. There was a lot of investigations where we found rational explanations. There was a couple living in Middleton, in a relatively old house, which is just outside Manchester in the UK. Only a young couple that had moved in. And it's surprising, why certain things happen, why people believe they're living in the haunted building. In fact, it was a new home. They wasn't used to the household sounds. The system in the cellar, which was the heating system, would come on a certain time. The air in the pipes would rattle those pipes at a certain time in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning, or what it would be. And of course, they just weren't aware of the house sounds. They thought it was something unusual. It had a spooky look, the house, to be honest with you, already. They'd already been interested in the subject of the paranormal. They'd watched some spooky films. The pet cat didn't seem to be too happy with the house. Well, most cats probably wouldn't be on a new move, just trying to find its feet. And of course, what they did, they reached out to a local vicar. Now, whilst we were there, the local vicar had apparently told them that the house had a bad spirit in it, and basically they should come to his church a little bit more often. And of course, it wasn't true. And we were faced with having to write an official letter to the church to complain about how the vicar had approached this situation. It left this couple absolutely petrified, as you can well imagine, when in fact there were all rational explanations for it. So, we don't know what we're dealing with sometimes when we walk into these places. We have to investigate every single thing to find out, is there a rational explanation? In many cases, there may be.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I believe that. I got a quick question. I again apologize. I will get off the subject and talk your ear off. Have you ever heard of Bobby Mackey's Tavern in Kentucky?
I have. Yes, I know Bobby Mackey's Tavern. Yes.
I got a real quick funny story. I actually went there years ago with a group out of Ohio to investigate it. And we got invited along. My brother knew the head guy. And we got there. I don't know if you've ever been there. It's literally the most disgusting place I've ever been in. I don't know what it was like when you were there, but it was just disgusting. And we did the downstairs, the basement, around the well, upstairs all night with a really good group of people that were very, not everything that made a sound was a ghost or anything. Well, the head guy that my brother knew come by at the end of the night, towards the end of the night, and he said, have you guys seen anything? And we both know. And my brother said, I think it's all a hoax, my opinion, because I sure haven't witnessed anything. We haven't. And he said, yeah, we kind of feel the same way. A few weeks after that, he called my brother one day and he said, have you guys gone through your stuff yet? I did. I did a lot of pictures and EVPs, and my brother did video. And we hadn't. We'd both been so busy, but he'd come across a really good video behind the stage of lights coming on and stuff. And then he never found anything on the video, but some of my pictures were really strange. It was super dusty, but they were like really bright, and it could have been nothing. It could have been the dust, but you would see dust in every picture. But like 1 out of 100, it would just like there's this like glow that didn't seem quite normal. But believe me, I'm not good enough at that. But I did get an EVP. We were both talking, and a voice said, I'd have to even see if I still have the file, but I think it said something like, kill her. And I mean, just plain as day, it was really plain, but yeah, that was interesting. I think the shows, cause it's a very popular place here in the United States for the TV shows and stuff. I think it's very, I think they go way overboard on it, but I do believe that there's something going on. Yeah.
I mean, of course, for any commercial type business which is associated with the paranormal, it can be good for them financially. It can be. I'm not saying that these things don't go bump in the night, but it can be very financially good, rewarding for them.
Mm-hmm.
So you've always got to take that on board that, you might be dealing with some real things that happen, but then there might be a lot which is just the icing on the cake, just been added to spice it up a little. And of course, it can be very difficult to move aside a lot of that to try and find out what at the core is there really anything going on. And like many places, sometimes there are some incidents, and then sometimes there's a lot of things that have been added on top of it.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I'm sorry. Dave, can you take over?
You've got kid issues. Right, Steve, anyway, thanks for all that up to now. What we're going to do then, we're going to move on to two other things. One of the things we wanted to talk about tonight was the alleged metal detecting related finds at in New Mexico at Roswell, yeah. And basically, can you firstly introduce the listeners to the events that took place allegedly in 1947?
Well, allegedly in 1947, as we're told, I mean, a lot of people probably heard this on the grapevine anyway over the years. An alleged UFO apparently crashed on a ranch owned by a gentleman called Matt Brazel in New Mexico. Now, it's a very small town, Roswell, but it's mostly famous for its 409 bomb group because the Enola Gay, which is the very famous song wrote by a band from the UK.
Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark.
Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, yeah. Flew out from there with the A-bomb, which was responsible for dropping on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, as far as I'm aware. And that's what it was kind of really known for. It's only a very small town. It was only known for that. However, it was certainly put on the map in 1947 in July when reports started coming in from a rancher saying that something unusual had crashed on his ranch. And of course, this reached the local military 409 bomb group, and a gentleman called Jesse Marcel went out to investigate to try and find out, was it something that they had? Was it a weather balloon that had come down? Was it something else? And he got there and he saw certainly debris, but he didn't see any type of craft at that time. But certainly something had seemed to have ploughed into the ground, leaving lots of alleged material behind. Strange I-beams, very foil-looking material which was blowing around in the wind, and clearly an impact site. But what would seem to have happened is that something had ploughed into the ground and then carried on flying for some time. So they couldn't exactly see an aircraft of any site, but certainly debris. And what was interesting about this debris was it was allegedly very unusual. The I-beams had unusual lettering on. Looked a little bit like hieroglyphics with a slight pinky purple tint to them. But what was really interesting is that, according to information, when he picked up the very large I-beams, they literally weighed nothing. It was like picking up a feather, and yet they couldn't bend it. It was extremely strong. And most of all, when they actually got hold of this foil-type material, Jesse Marcel screwed this up like you would screw up and crinkle up into your hand a piece of aluminium foil. And when he let go, it opened up and retained its shape again. And this is why it became very unusual, because it was apparently material that had never been seen like this before. Jesse Marcel apparently took some pieces home to show his son. His son recounted those incidents many years later. After which the military came in, apparently cleared out the area, and conducted an investigation, and several miles away, they allegedly found the craft. And the story has it is that it was some type of triangular disc-shaped object, kind of in between, with several small bodies of what might be referred to as aliens of some sort. These typical grey small aliens with large eyes. And a local coroner was brought in to provide small coffins for them because they were dead. And of course, he was in contact with a nurse who said that these bodies were taken to a local hospital. The doctors were trying to look at them, trying to examine them, find out what they were. and she caught sight of these things. She went and provided testimony before disappearing. And there's a lot of interesting facts about the Roswell incident, and the story's gone on from there. However, when the military was basically pressed for information about this, they came up with numerous different theories. One, that it was some type of weather balloon. Two, that the aliens were in fact crash dummies. The problematics of this is that crash dummies weren't really used to the early 1950s. When, this was in 1947, so that doesn't exactly fit the bill. So they've released numerous different statements which contradict each other. And this has only fueled the fire regarding the Roswell incident. But however, recently, there's people been out there with metal detectors for many years, not knowing exactly where that location is, because Matt Brazel's not around anymore. And they were scouring, and it's a vast area. It is a vast area. So knowing exactly where to take your metal detector and start looking around, that's if it even picks up on a metal detector. Is it made of a certain type of material? It might not even pick it up. We just do not know. But nevertheless, people have gone out there with the best equipment that they can lay their hands on, and to sweep the desert backwards and forwards for many years in different locations of the ranch, which is thousands of miles of area. Eventually, people have found little bits and bobs. In fact, it wasn't too long ago when I was actually came across somebody who was selling bags of Roswell dirt on eBay, of all places. And people were daft enough to buy it. Fine, fair enough. It's all memorabilia at the end of the day. But people have been out there with a metal detectors, and of course, some people claim to have found some. Now, it wasn't too long ago. I think in February of 2018. There were some rumours of a gentleman called, I think his name was Frank Kimball. Yeah, Frank Kimball. And he was with some Mexican institute who claimed to have picked up and found through metal detecting some very unusual items. Now, what's very interesting about this, the statement went out and the press picked it up, and it even reached over here in the UK. We read that press, and this went on from February to April of 2018. And we really needed to get to the crunch of the matter, so we approached Frank. Now, at that time, as you mostly what happens is that the press always like to sensationalise things. They always do. But there was a little bit more truth to the fact is that, yes, he did believe that he'd actually found some items, but he hadn't concluded that they were alien or extraterrestrial in origin. In fact, he still had one study to conduct, which would actually give a conclusive answer if it was something unusual or not. As far as I'm aware, that has never come forward since. Now, I don't know the reasons why. Did Frank find something unusual and didn't put it out there? Or there simply was no story. There simply was, it was just an item which might have been from an aircraft, because there'd been a number of aircraft crashes over that desert over the period of through the 1930s to 40s. Was it parts of equipment tests? We don't know. We have no idea. It's gone very quiet. I'm assuming that the last test was carried out, but that conclusive answer didn't seem to come forward, as far as I'm aware, to say it was this or it was that. But nevertheless, you go to Roswell, there are people still out there with the metal detectors trying to find that golden nugget, you might say, of evidence to support once and for all that some type of extraterrestrial vehicle crash, and that it's made up of a certain metal of some sort, which is just you would not find on Earth. It would not have terrestrial isotopes. That continues today. People are out there in the hundreds looking for these little items, but we don't know. Apparently, according to information, the 409 bomb group sent hundreds of soldiers out there on their hands and knees, combing the area, turning the soil over. Trucks of this material was taken away, as well as topsoil. The likelihood of actually finding something can be a bit slim. It's not impossible. Maybe something is still out there. We won't really know for sure, I don't think, until actually somebody comes up and says, yes, this is it. This is the tests have been completed. And yes, this is made of a material that you would not find on Earth. However, we're only assuming the fact is that, that it's made from products that aren't found on Earth, because we have lots of chemicals and rocks and things which are found on the Earth, which might be on other planets as well. So we have to say, why should it? Would it really have something in there which we wouldn't expect to see? It's very questionable, but as you can well imagine, it fuels the fire. And Roswell continues to be an ever-present story in the headlines of the newspapers around the world, and a continuing mystery.
I'd like to jump in real quick, if I may. First, I want to say I apologize. I had a sneezing fit. Dave, that's what it was. But kind of some interesting stuff here. Supposedly, they say that the crash material went to Wright-Patt Air Force Base.
That's correct. Absolutely.
And the hangar that they say it went to, I can now tell you, is a hangar where they actually work on repair and things for the Air Force Museum. Now, a funny thing about the Air Force Museum, it's right there with Wright-Patt. It is incredible if you ever get the chance. I mean, if you're in the UK and you ever get the chance to come to the United States, I would say just stop in Dayton, Ohio.
Yeah.
But the Enola Gay, did I say that right?
Enola Gay, yeah.
That I believe she is in the museum.
They kept her in there, right? Yes,
I heard that. Yeah. So, but that hangar now is no longer. All it's used for is to work on the planes and equipment that go into the museum.
Well, it's very interesting, Mike, because according to official documents which have been obtained through the Freedom of Information Act now across the US, there was three projects: Project Moondust, Project Gemini, and Project Bluefly, and those were associated with crashed items. It was a crash retrieval team to take these items to none other than Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where they were examining. Now, those sort of things could have been a Soviet satellite that came down. It could have been a number of things, but it certainly would also have covered that thing as well, whatever that was. And we do know that on an official record, you can follow the trace of information to say this stuff was taken in its tonnage to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Where it went from then on, we have no idea. But we have people which have come out, whistleblowers, that said, yes, they saw the trucks of material. It was taken in there. It was analysed. And even the actual object was allegedly taken there as well, apparently flown in. And under probably under the darkness of the sky to Wright-Patterson, and examined and probably relocated somewhere else, obviously, as time has gone on. But it was the heart of analysis of any foreign item that came down to ground in the US. It was a very, very central location, Wright-Patterson.
Yes, yeah. Very interesting. I'm sorry.
Don't you love the fact, Mike, that Steve's outbeating you when it comes to talking?
He is doing. Well, I'm just listening. It's amazing. I love what he's talking about, and I'm so interested. Although I've heard so much about Roswell and stuff being here, and it's definitely very, very compelling. Some of the stuff that's come out about that.
So
it's surprising what you end up getting involved in numerous different investigations. Only last year I finished an 18-month investigation in Peru. And as many will know, when I say three-fingered mummies that apparently hit our screens in the national and international press, all of them, everybody was talking about these things. That there was finally evidence dug up from the ground to prove that once and for all these things were real. When I had the option to officially investigate this, because they came to us, the guys came to us and said, look, guys, you call it as it is. That's exactly what we want. They'd already had a lot of bad press because people just weren't swallowing it. They came to us and said, look, guys, we want you to conduct a thorough official investigation about this, and say it as it is. The downside of that is that they probably didn't expect us to find what we found, and it got a little hairy. I have to say,
Steve, can I just bump in a minute? Obviously, for people who are listening who don't know about this, Last year, Steve was heavily present in the UK media with regards to the alleged three-fingered Peruvian mummy called Maria. Now, am I right in saying this was discovered allegedly near the Nazca lines or in the Nazca?
That's correct. Area? Yes, in a cave in the Nazca region.
So can you give us a bit of background on Maria, first of all, before we get on to...
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I first saw her, 100%, she was a body. Absolutely. This was not a mannequin. This was a real body. She had dermal ridging on her 3 toes, which were very long, and her 3 fingers, which were very long. No thumbs, no toes, no big toes. She had a slightly elongated head. She had very large eyes. Her eyes were larger. The oval capacity of the eye sockets were larger than what you would expect to see in a human. Very small mouth, very small nose. She was female, according to the rib count. She was in a fetal position, as many bodies which are exhumed from the desert are in Peru, in that sitting position in the fetal side. And she was covered she was all white. And the headlines, there were people coming to us and saying, well, she's clearly covered in plaster. Surely it's fake. Well, it turned out it actually wasn't plaster she was covered in, though it looks very much so. It was something referred to as diatomaceous earth. Now, I'm not too sure if any of our listeners out there come across this. There are certain places around the world where diatomaceous earth, which is, I will tell you what that is, it's microcrustaceans. If you look at it under the microscope, it's micro shells. It's crustaceans from the bottom of the ocean. Now, what's happened in Peru is that over millennia, the mountains have moved and basically lifted up. The mountains was the bottom of the sea, and it's lifted them up to ascend into the sky, where you'll find these crustaceans on the ground. You can even find fossilized fish on the top of these mountains. It's really profound. But it was millennia ago, the bottom of the ocean. And you'll find these areas of diatomaceous earth, and it's very white. It's like powder. Now, there is some forms of diatomaceous earth which they actually sell over the internet, which is good to consume as a drink. It's apparently very good for the body. It helps clear the body out of toxins, and people actually swear by it. But there are 2 forms of diatomaceous earth. There's sea diatomaceous earth and freshwater diatomaceous earth. And to look at it, it looks like powder. It looks like a powdered plaster. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference on looking and feeling it. It basically looks and feels the same. And of course, this is what one of the big problems was, because people thought it was actually plaster of Paris being applied to the body, when in fact it was diatomaceous earth. It was only when we started to investigate it so much thoroughly, involving scientists and Sri Lanka laboratories, DNA analysis, and so on and so forth, when we started to put the clues together as what was really going on.
So, obviously, at that point, then, you've seen the mummy, you've took your time looking at the evidence, you've spent time doing everything you need to do. How did you actually get permission for the DNA test to be conducted?
Well, basically, because what had happened was that Maria wasn't on her own. There was a smaller body, which was known as Wawita, which was, again, another body. It was of a child, probably 1 to 2 years of age, very small in size, 3 fingers, 3 toes, and covered in diatomaceous earth. It's very similar to Maria. But also, there were these ones they brought out to show us, which I immediately realized these were fake. They were 24 inches long. They looked to be made not from any bones I could have identified at the time. Covered in diatomaceous earth. They look, to be honest with you, they look more like dolls, to be honest with you. The analysis on them, it didn't take much to realize very quickly that they'd utilized animal bones. Their actual heads were made from llama skulls and dog skulls. Some of the bones were back to front. There were bird bones in there. And what was really alarming is that there were also very young human bones in there as well. So we knew that this was a concoct. The people had got all sorts of different things and thrown it together and manufactured this doll. And there were several of these. And because they came under the legislation that these things were not a living creature, but a doll, we managed to pass the DNA through because of that reason, because they were listing, and we were listing them as, these things weren't real, they weren't a living creature, so therefore the analysis could go forward. Amongst that, though, was the DNA analysis of Maria and Wawita as well. And when that came back, now this is where it started getting very interesting. This is where the twist takes us. When we went up there, Peru is not for the faint-hearted, I'll tell you now, guys. Though that you don't really need a metal detector up there, because I'll be honest with you, in regions of Peru, it's just all lying there on top of the ground. It's so much been disturbed by thousands of people digging that items and artifacts are just lying around. Now, you won't find it in the main city, but as soon as you travel out a couple of miles, there's huge, vast areas of grave sites which have been robbed and pillaged by thousands of people over the years. Now, you have to take into consideration the economical, the way the country is economically. It's on its knees. The government don't support people, and they're trying to rob Peter to pay Paul to survive. And I can understand the reasons why they go out there, they pillage graves, they try and find artifacts. There's a huge black market involved. The mafia are involved. And unfortunately, we found ourselves right in the middle of this, being taken secretly to locations, not knowing we were dealing with the mafia at the end of it, because they were trying to sell Maria. Maria was up for over $1 million, and on the black market, I'll tell you. And I will tell you also that there were people interested from abroad, from Russia and other places. Some items were already sold to somebody in Spain. There was a massive black market going on, and we were right in the thick of it. And of course, it was a bit dangerous. It was a bit worrying. We didn't realise what we got ourselves into until we were in it, and our lives were threatened. It got to the point where they realised, these guys aren't going to be in our favour. They're too good. They're going to find out what's going on, and yes, we did. And when they realised what we knew, this is when the threats started coming. Let's just say we can't go to Peru anytime soon, guys. But we had to do what we needed to do because there was crimes being committed. We ended up working with the Peruvian government then and the Ministry of Tourism to try and put this to a stop because the bodies had not been seized. They were still out there. They were still trying to sell them on the black market. Illegal actions were taking place. And it was also encouraging others to go out and do the same. And we found that there was a production line of this going on. People were being paid handsomely. Taxidermists with specialities doing these sort of things were manufacturing them. So when we went in there to conduct DNA analysis, we took samples from we wanted to get to the crunch of the matter. We're not going to take a sample from the shoulder or the arm. We want to, what's the differences on Maria? She's got 3 long fingers and 3 long toes. She surely couldn't have walked around properly. She wouldn't have been able to sustain herself. And we wanted to take samples from the hot areas, these places where it's significantly different, which is the fingers, which is the toes. And we took some samples. We got them back to Sri Lanka, and that's an interesting place. And they conducted, so it was lengthy. Analysis doesn't take place overnight. It takes weeks and weeks for that information to come forward. And eventually we got some information which we were puzzled about because they came back to us and said, well, it looks like there's a mutation. There's a mutation we can't identify. We don't understand about the sample. And we were very, very thorough. There was a chain of custody. It was professionally taken. There was not anything was being contaminated there, and we just couldn't understand. So we went public and said, there is a mutation there. We don't know what it constitutes, but there is one. But as we were doing this and talking about this in the US, we had a big convention take place in Los Angeles, and we let the world know that, yes, there was a mutation there. Now, what people immediately did when they heard the word mutation is put 2 and 2 together and come up with 5. Because they thought the mutation was something representable of something extraterrestrial. which that wasn't actually the case, because it was only about 6 months later that we finally got the cherry on the cake. Eventually, the information came back as to what that mutation was. We thought it was a mutation because within one sample, there were 2 human DNAs in there. In other words, the cat was out of the bag. What they had done to manufacture Maria's long fingers on her hand was utilize not one human, but 2 human finger bones together and basically put together by a taxidermist and covered over in diatomaceous earth to literally hide the evidence of alteration. And that's what that mutation was. And of course, that's when the war started. That's when the threats came, and we thought, that's it. We've done our job. We're now going to conclude, and we let the world know exactly that all these things have been manufactured, they were faked, how they've done it, who by. And we just passed all that over to the authorities in Peru and took a step back. We did our job, and don't get me wrong, there are caves up there in Nazca. There are some amazing stories. Then even the Nazca people that live up there talk about 3-fingered beings. And this is the whole problem of it, is because there's so much enriched history and stories and legends about these strange things in Nazca that it's quite easy to believe someone might just suddenly find something like that. Unfortunately, whoever found or whoever manufactured this realized that there was a lot of money involved. And there's a war going on currently in Peru of artifacts being taken. Now, it's very difficult because you can walk into a shop in Peru and you can pick up artifacts which are being sold as certain items and they're getting out of the country. You can't tell the difference between something which is modern or not now. But there are people out there which are digging them up. Which are getting into graveyards and robbing them and selling them to general public on the streets of Lima, the city markets, for quite a handsome price for some of these things. And they're being sold. So what's happening is that the culture is being sold worldwide, the heritage. And it is a shame. And it's out of control and it cannot be managed. The government has stipulated, not just to us, but to publicly, that is something that they cannot manage. It's happening so much that they can't maintain that. They just cannot do that. And it's continuing to this day. And unfortunately, the black market is very powerful people, and the mafia. It's not the first time people have gone missing over things like this. Involvement with artifacts. There's a lot of money that's involved. And of course, we tried our very best to do what was right, what was proper, and conclude, and hopefully put this to rest. There are people still out there, though, which know, despite our conclusions, despite the DNA and despite evidence coming forward, just will not believe it. We want to believe in something so much sensationalized, like it's an alien of some sort, rather than the actual facts. I'm sure there are maybe some strange things out there, but on this occasion, there was a rational explanation.
So, what is Maria's current status?
Well, she went missing. I mean, I believe that they still have her under lock and key, we could say, being kept in a certain condition, which is, I would say they are trying to make sure that she stays the way she is. It's very difficult I don't even believe she was taken from the Nazca region. In fact, I think it's more Palpa. The evidence supports Palpa than the Nazca region. I mean, the problem is when you take anybody from that region, it's very, very dry there, it's very hot, and take it into the city limits of where the humidity is completely different. You're going to get deterioration quite fast, and I think this is the problem for them, that they were trying to make sure that she retains the way she is. I believe that she's still for the black market, but I think because we've constituted the fact that we put it out, it's gone out in the press, it's worldwide, that this thing is fake, and there's evidence to support it. I think the interest in purchasing Maria has gone away, and they're kind of left with a situation now that they want to keep her, but don't know really what to do with her. We've talked with them. We've even begged them to release the body, because it is a body at the end of the day. It's been altered, and let put it to rest. I mean, it's immoral, it's wrong, and it's such a shame, and it's quite upsetting to hear that they've used children's bones in some of these manufacturers. It's shocking and it's awful. I mean, it's got to end at some place. But we're battling a system economy in Peru, and I don't think it's going to end anytime soon. She's gone underground, Maria. Excuse the pun, but and I'm sure she may surface again in the near future. We've had already rumours coming forward that there is another one, a male, which looks like Maria, which might hit our press within the next 6 months. I'm sure it'll go on for some time. Whilst there are people out there which are quite happy to pay money, quite happy to believe things without evidence, I'm sure there'll be a market for them. It is a shame, but like I say, we went in there to do our job. We concluded, and we've moved away and working on other cases now. But the fuel for this case is still going on. There's still massive debate about this. And of course, there are people which are putting conferences together in hope of raising money. They spend a lot of money, people on tickets, to go and listen to some absolute tripe about something which isn't true. There are people going to these places in the hundreds. So whilst there's money to be made in this, I'm sure there will be people which will continue to do so. And it's, like I say, it is a rather a shame.
Now, I've got to ask Steve, because you know I'm like this. When you were threatened, how were you threatened?
Well, basically, they told us that it's a big desert. They had guns. We could see them. We were taken to the secret location. We weren't allowed to know where we were going. To be honest with you, they didn't blindfold us, and we thought, this is unusual. Why aren't they not blindfolded? Well, when we came out of the city and headed up into the mountains, it's already bad dealing with the situation, the environmental situation in Peru, because as soon as you get off the plane, you're immediately hit with altitude sickness if you're not used to it. And we climbed from, I believe, around about 10,000 feet up to 14,500 feet. The air was so thin, the vehicle's engine was cutting out occasionally. We ended up on the top of the world, and all you could see for miles around were mountains and condors. Don't get me wrong, beautiful sight, but very, very difficult to breathe. And when we were trying to put a very raw video together about this, the comments on the video was, this guy's got a problem with asthma, or this guy's he needs his lungs looking at. Well, what they didn't realise is that we're at 14,500 feet. It's very difficult to talk and actually breathe at the same time. And we had to do it was very challenging. But the guys there, we rolled up. There was a warehouse. There was scrapping dogs outside. There was rubbish around. They had guns. This was the mafia. We had to be very, very careful. And they made threats to us. It was a big desert. You'd be taken out there. Nobody found you. And do you know what, guys? I believed them. them. We would never be found. So we had to tread very, very carefully. We didn't realise what we got ourselves into. But we had to carry on. We had to be thorough. We had to be professional. Only when we got back to the safety of our UK soil and Irish soil as well, because a gentleman called Barry Fitzgerald came with me on the investigation. And Barry's well known within the TV shows because he was the principal investigator on Ghost Hunters International, which was very well known throughout the world. But Barry's wasn't so much interested, believe it or not, doing all that work in the field of the paranormal. He wasn't really interested. He was interested in ancient sites. And he's done extensive work on these locations, and he was perfect for the job. He came with me. So when we got back to Ireland and the UK, then we realised, well, we're not going to be going back to Peru very time soon, not after all the problems we've caused the mafia. And we thought, okay, well, we're going to go for it. We decided to release all the information. We never held back. We told them exactly how it is. Of course, there are still people out there which will still send the odd thing to us. We just ignore it and move on. But it was scary at the time, I admit. And they didn't blindfold us. The reason was because we had no idea. When we were taken from the city out until, several miles up into the mountains, climbing all the time up to 14,500 feet, they took a left, they took a right, they took a right, they took a left. Every single road was a dirt path. No signs on any roads. We didn't need to blindfold. We had absolutely no clue where we were until we pulled outside the place with guys, armed people outside. Not a single good expression on their faces. They all look like angry people. And of course, we're looking at these and we're trying to swallow we've completely lost our spit. You can well imagine the fear that had took over. And I thought, well, we're just going to have to go for it and hope for the best. And we had conditions we had to meet. We weren't allowed to take cell phones. We were daft enough to do it. Daft enough to do it because we wanted an answer. We wanted to find out. And the partners at home were going absolutely crazy with us, saying, are you mad? What are you doing? You're not even taking your phones. You might disappear. What the hell was happening? And we just decided to try to not worry them so much and just go for it. And luckily we got out of the country. We got all the information. And like I say, it's not going to be a holiday resort for us anytime soon.
Mike, have you got anything else you want to ask about Maria and the experience in Peru?
Oh, I no, not really a comment. I think it's great that what you guys did, and you didn't fold under the pressure, and you let people know. That's good. Now, do you believe that there are? Do you believe in the possibility of aliens? Has there been anything that you've studied where you believe in it? And do you think that, like the Nazca lines and all that?
Well, I think the first thing, I mean, to be completely honest here, Mike, I think people do not take consideration of how advanced our ancient civilizations were and their capability. Mm-hmm. They could do some real clever stuff. Now, just because we don't know how they might have done it today doesn't necessarily mean that it couldn't have been done. We're already finding methods of cutting through granite stone with sound now. And basically a copper pipe, and it can cut a perfect hole within a period of 35 minutes through a foot length of granite stone. And people say it can't be done on television shows. Well, yes, it can, but not the conventional ways. And then we say, well, it can't be done with what we've got today. Well, no, because you have to go back in time and consider what they might have been using in their day. There are probably methods of doing some fantastic things, and I don't think they give the ancients enough credit for that. However, there is biblical scriptures, ancient scriptures, which talk of beings coming from the sky people, and so many different things. And there may be something to that. There may actually be something to that, but we've always got to consider that legends, tales, myths, spiritual beings of like the ancients not only wrote about what they dreamed, what they thought, and how they felt into writing. We might read something and take it verbatim, that it's very factual. When in fact we're really dealing with somebody who's a spiritual being, who's having dreams, maybe even out of body experiences, through induced things that they're digesting. It could be all sorts of things, and it gets all round up in a problematic cocktail. And this is where we are today. Though that there are people which are heavily into the ancient astronaut theory, there are others which are academics which will counter it. I say to be grounded. If there's evidence to support it, it will be there somewhere. But what I'm finding is that though there are some amazing places around the world, and I've visited these locations, and I have to question, how on earth they managed to do it. Don't necessarily jump to the extraterrestrial hypothesis, because sometimes we have some very clever people around. And it does happen. There are, we found through doing studies in Ireland, and we brought a team of metal detectors in, because what we were finding was in these old locations in Ireland from the 1400s, that there was iron buried under the floor, purposely put there in certain locations. They were very, what you might say, spiritual. They had certain beliefs. And what happened was we realized very quickly that our old Irish traditions, and not just Irish as well, that they were placing iron around to ward away the paranormal. So they were finding iron purposely buried under the beds and under the doors. This is where the theory of the lucky horseshoe came from. It wasn't because it was lucky or it's a symbolism of luck. It was because it was made of iron. And this was first put up around places to ward away bad spirits, because if anything went wrong in the family, it was considered the bad spirit was responsible. Mm-hmm. In some cases, there might have been some paranormal incidents taking place, but they soon widespread this idea right through medieval times, because what do we see around our English churches, if not overseas, is iron-wrought gates and iron fencing. And this is to deter spirits from entering into our realm, keep them in the location. And it's spread out throughout Europe, if not some other places now. The theories are there, the information's there, but it's buried away. People don't look at it and think and ask the questions, why is that like that? Where did that idea come from? Well, it comes from all that. It comes right back to our ancestors believing that iron, somehow the phenomena would be evasive to it. And we don't really know why, but it's very, very interesting. In India and other places, they use hematite. And what is hematite if it's not more than 90% or so of iron ore in it? Very similar thing. So it's fascinating. And what was great was to see so many people doing metal detecting testing and coming across these hits all the time. And what it found trying to find out why is this isn't just been put here accidentally. It's not a leftover from thousands of years ago. They've been purposely placed in certain places. And then he started to research it and find the reasons why is that they were put there purposely to ward away bad spirits. And of course, no society than the Irish have a larger concept of legends of myths and tales about the banshee and the fairies and all sorts of things that might come in the dwellings of night and do harm or things which are not good. And this was, even if they weren't having experiences, they may have even done this as traditionally to bury these items on purpose. It's fascinating when you actually look at the history.
Steve, real quick, we're going to take a quick, minute and a half break. And so bear with us here a minute. And I just want to say, if you're ever in the United States and you need a detectorist on the job, get a hold of me, please. I would love to get involved in some of what you guys are doing. Okay.
You know I don't need to say that, Steve.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay, guys, we'll be right back. All right, we're going to be back sooner than later. I put the wrong thing on there, Dave. I apologize. I was going to play the advertisement for ArchMD Mag. So just tell us about ArchMD Mag real quick. How about that, Dave?
Okay. Well, I actually with Steve on air, with me formerly being involved in the Phenomena magazine and seeing the concept of how it was made, working alongside Steve, I obviously learned a lot. And due to that, 3 years ago, I think, due to a bout of illness, being off long term, and I was being very bored, I came up with the idea to form the Archaeology and Metal Detecting magazine as a potential conduit between both genres, and to be able to, exactly the same as Phenomena magazine, give people information for free. Pass the information out there, be a central location for everything. And that's obviously progressed. 2 years ago, Luke Higgins come on board, who's behind the scenes, as always, tonight. Thank you, as ever. And we went from strength to strength. We've had a few tumbles, one just 2 months ago, which meant we more or less had to start the website entirely again. So on the back of that, we're running up full and proper now. The Facebook feed has changed massively. There's a lot less of the magazine itself on there, but we do share anything up to 100 posts over a 24-hour period regarding history, archaeology, mystery, metal detecting, and a lot more. There are some other things in the fire at the moment that we will be getting onto, as well as obviously taking part in All Metal Mode UK podcast. We do also have a Sunday service where we issue a newscast of the week's top stories, and that's available on Spreaker, Archaeology and Metal Detecting magazine. Also, we pass that through via Facebook, via Twitter, via YouTube as well. So that's all enabled for everybody to see. So in short, that's the Archaeology and Metal Detecting magazine, which didn't say properly then because I stuttered a little bit and got it all wrong.
Yeah, I have to say it's an exceptional magazine. I mean, I'm coming from a magazine owner, and I looked at what Dave was doing and circulating this information for free, because that's what it's about. I mean, there's always going to be competition from big companies who have an invested interest in their own magazines, which are charging ridiculous amounts of money on the shop shelf. The future is that these things are going to be in digital format. Even Vogue magazine now has a digital format. This is the way it's going. And it's because it can be accessed worldwide at a click of a button. And that's what makes it so good. And of course, putting information out for free, people love things which are free. And most of all, the information that's in the magazine it's very critical. It's very good. It's right to the point, and it's regular. And that's what I love about it. I love the fact that people out there can simply get hold of something that they don't have to hunt around. They don't have to pay a fortune around. People have a right to information, and thank Dave for that too.
Very much. And as I say, we have numerous. Until the website went down a couple of months ago, some of Steve's articles on there, which will be refreshed when I've got opportunity to do that. We're now concentrating more so on fresh articles that were written for the Archaeology and Metal Detecting magazine by ourselves, by friends, by people who, offer their information to the magazine. I've just took a big swig of Pepsi, so it came out. I do apologise. So in short, that's the Archaeology and Metal Detecting magazine. We're trying to do as much as we can. And again, Luke has been a lifesaver in a lot of ways. We've had a bit of a calm period over the last month or two, obviously with Christmas. My work's gone mental. Luke's work went mental over the Christmas period. And within the coming weeks, we'll be back to doing as much as we can, as often as we can. So there you go. That's that.
Brilliant. Dave, I want to ask you a question. Have you any plans of doing any events for 2019? It'd be great if you got an event together. Invite a lot of people.
As you know, Steve, we did try to put together an Archaeology and Metal Detecting magazine conference. Basically, the location where we were holding it, everything was sorted, everything was dealt with, and they pulled the plug last minute. So we were unable to carry on with that, unfortunately. Yeah. Currently, obviously, myself and Luke do talk about many, many things. Luke's got a number of things, irons in the fire. There will hopefully be some Archaeology and Metal Detecting magazine rallies. We're also hoping to be a part of Detectable again this year, which is the biggest, for yourself, obviously, Steve, who doesn't know, it's the biggest metal detecting event in the country, and it's. I went last year for the first time. Unfortunately, I camped, which is always a bad idea, and it was absolutely phenomenal. Other than that, currently, I would like to build up to doing something like was initially planned, but at the moment, it's got to be more. I've got to put something together. My son's class at school are doing about knights and castles and such like, and would like me to do a talk about knights and castles and archaeology. So I've got to do that in the coming weeks. So at the moment, that's the latest plans. We've got something pretty massive and unique coming off in the coming months, which is a first for the subjects, which I'll tell you about off air in depth. Right. So, and that will be digital. So that's about it currently. That's taken up most of the time. There you go.
Good deal.
You know all about it, Michael.
Yes, sir. Yes, I do. Exciting stuff coming.
We hope so. Anyway, Steve, moving on. Obviously, we've spoke about the metal detector at Roswell. We've spoken about the mummy case Maria in Peru. I've been to many of your talks and such like, and one of the people we both knew who was very, very prominent and a UK specialist, I would suggest, in ancient Earth mysteries was Arthur Tomlinson. Obviously, you know Arthur very well. As obviously you work with Arthur, and obviously I would believe a lot of what he said led you to looking into the ancient Earth mysteries and such like. Yeah. What would be the most prominent in your mind as one of the biggest ancient Earth mysteries?
Well, there's a number of them, and I've been lucky enough to travel overseas and visit these locations, or hundreds of different locations over the last years, and some of them really do strike a chord. And if we talk about some of the buildings throughout Malta, they're amazing how they built them. Some of these things are resonance chambers. Now, the first thing that strikes a chord is when you go into these places, for a start, the whole room is cut out of literally bedrock. granite bedrock. And on the level of rock hardness and the scale, we're talking about an 8.5 of 10. To cut this type of rock is tremendously hard. But not only has this been cut out, this complete perfect room, and we're not talking a small room here, we're talking about 30 feet by 15 feet. There's one entrance and exit. You go in there, perfect cut doorway, into a room, and it's polished. The granite walls are polished, and the only way to polish that wall is to apply a tremendous amount of heat and rubbing down, and this process has to go on and on and on for many years. The amount of heat to apply there is not your just normal common fire. You couldn't generate that type of heat from a normal fire. I've absolutely no idea how they got the levelness of this wall, because the corners are so sharp they will cut your finger. It's absolutely incredible. They look like mirrors. And to be honest with you, it doesn't end there. The whole room is a resonance chamber. And when I talk about resonance chambers, that when the ancestors used to go into these places and sit round in certain locations and do the gantras, they generated a certain frequency that would affect an individual at the center of the room. Now we're finding this 110 hertz, 111 hertz. And in fact, scientific evidence now to show that certain locations was like visiting the doctors. Certain locations, you would take somebody who might have internal or external wounds, taken into one of these resonance chambers, 6 people would come in, sit in designated locations and do the gantra on. And when they hit that certain frequency, it bounces back from the walls to the center of that room where that individual is sat. That individual experiences the healing of internal and external wounds 6 times faster just through that frequency. I don't know how they managed to do that. I don't know where the knowledge comes from, but it's absolutely incredible. And what's really fascinating is that we are finding these now all over the world, even in Ireland, everywhere. And the same ideas, the same methods, and God knows what technology they use to actually do that. But there's certain ways they manage to do things which we are scratching our heads at as to how where the knowledge even came from. But the effects of sound on the human body is a new science now, sound healing. More scientists are coming forward and saying, yes, you know what, we can affect the human mind, we can affect the human physiological body, we can create areas of the body where it becomes healed, or it changes the blood type, how the reactions, the chemical and biological traces in the body can be altered through frequencies. We're finding this all over the world, and recent discoveries in Africa found exactly the same thing. They're thousands and thousands of years old. The evidence is left behind in stone. There's the message. You would never have something wrote down on paper which would last that time. The messages are all around the world. And we're finding the same thing. And it's absolutely fascinating. And some of the things which have been found in these locations are incredible. There's been some wonderful discoveries over the years. The Baghdad battery, for one, which literally was a battery cell, using a small copper pipe in a cell, utilizing citric acid to generate a charge. What the ancients were doing, they were electroplating. Because there's such a fascination with gold, so much so from the Egyptians and many other civilizations around the world, is that they tried to fool people by electroplating, actually covering items in gold rather than it being solid gold. And the only way to do that was to generate an electrical current. And we found these things in Baghdad. There have been other ones that have been discovered around the world. There are people out there now and thank God for the technology we have now and the great equipment we have, which is becoming more and more available, because it's giving people the opportunity to go out there with the metal detectors and numerous other types of equipment and come across wondrous things. And some of that information is being trickle-fed through the media now to us. There's probably a lot more out there that we don't know. But we're finding these things, and to be honest with you, we just don't have the answers. But it is absolutely fascinating nonetheless.
It sounds like, and I just want to kind of confirm this, because I think along the same lines. I think the ancient people were much smarter than we give them credit for. Would you agree?
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. I mean, the problem is that it's our forward thinking and our physics. We're stuck in a box, and we've got to think outside the box, just like the ancients did, because they didn't have the same physics and the principles and the ideas and the belief system that we have currently in our society. We have to think outside the box, because sometimes something which might have been very simplistic, we're scratching our heads because we're thinking it was done in a technological manner. Well, it might not have been. Sometimes we're finding that there are simple ways to doing something, when in fact we're thinking that it has to be something technological. I think we underestimate the ancient civilization.
Now, one of the theories that I've heard, I got to tell you, I love the show Ancient Aliens, because no matter what, there's a lot of history being shown and discussed and stuff. And there's some things that they say that I think is interesting. There's a lot of it I think is really far stretch. But, one of the things that a common theory amongst them on the show is that the technology was given to us, was given to the ancient people. Do you buy into that at all?
Well, I have to question sometimes, the information that they put down in scriptures and what they wrote about. I mean, if you just look at the Dogon Indians, they talk about star systems and planets, which weren't you couldn't see them with the naked eye. And they are absolutely 100% correct, on their alignments and the knowledge. How they knew that, I do not know. We would suggest that obviously some form of technology or information has been passed to them. We do find that. And that is what is strange about this stuff. We do find that information around, even in India from the Vimana days, some thousands of years ago, about Mercury engine craft. When in fact only 20 years ago, the aircraft development companies in the US were working with Mercury engine craft. It fascinates me. And don't get me wrong, there is a lot of mysteries out there which just defy rational explanation. However, I think in many occasions that they may have been utilizing something which might have been very simplistic, and we just haven't really come across it. Right. The penny's not they've managed to do it. Though I watched that television series myself, I'm very acquainted with it and the people in those shows. And it fascinates me. I mean, we're actually working on projects ourselves in regarding a development that's going to be taking place in Blackpool, of all places in the UK, a huge development theme park called Chariots of the Gods, which we're heavily involved with. And it does look at those type of missions, because people are fascinated. They want to ask those questions, those principal questions. Where did we come from? How did we get here? How did the ancients do what they did? There's been mass debate over different ancient sites, and it will continue just as much as like the pyramids do. There's so much secrecy in countries. We only know at least 10% of the information surrounding the pyramids of the Giza Plateau. I guarantee the Egyptian government know a lot more. And this is what we find. But slowly but surely, information is coming out. We're learning a little bit more each and every day about how the ancients did certain things. And there is so much that they could teach us. There really is. But like any TV show, you have to, kind of separate the chaff from the wheat. You have to look at it with an open mind and say, okay, I accept that could be real. But then there is a lot of hype that might be added to it, because there is this ancient alien hypothesis. And that is, remembering the word hypothesis, it's a theory, just as any other baseline theory. It's the one that fits at the time. But we might, as we progress through life, find better things to come up with, to say they may have done it this way, they may have done it that way. But nevertheless, we live in a wondrous world of mysteries that just are begging to be answered, and I think this is what drives that interest in such shows like Ancient Aliens.
Absolutely, I agree, and I think you gotta take it with a grain of salt. And I think there is a lot of hype on a lot of the shows, but although we're going to kind of segue into that, we had a guest on that has visited Oak Island. His name, Dave, I know his name. It's in my head. Randall Sullivan. And I have felt like from the beginning that show wasn't a lot of hype. I mean, of course, there's they found this, wait until the next episode. But I felt like the people on the island involved in this, there's, the guys, doing this, the brothers and everybody, that it's not a bunch of hype and they believe in what they're doing. And after talking to Randall, I believe even more, don't you, Dave, that it's all very well, those guys are doing it in a very good way. But do you have any thoughts on Oak Island?
Can I just butt in? I've actually just watched the latest episode in the UK, and what Steve was talking about before with the drilling and such like. They've actually took onto the island this week a sonic driller, basically, which uses vibrations. It doesn't use power to drill or pressure or anything. It uses sonic vibrations to drill through, and that was actually quite interesting and related to what Steve said earlier.
Well, actually, I've been shown a demonstration of this working, and it's amazing. Within half an hour, you can cut through a foot of bedrock in a perfect circle, and just by applying sound to a small pipe, and it's a 2.5-inch pipe, and it vibrates with the sound, and all they do is they pour water onto it, and it cuts through a perfect circle through granite stone. So it's not impossible. There are simple ways for creating these amazing things. I think that's great that actually people are actually starting to use sonic equipment. Like I say, we've got this technology at our hands now. There's so much more we can do.
Absolutely.
So obviously you watch Oak Island yourself, Steve, and you've been privy to that information.
Yeah.
Do you think anything will be found?
Well, there's a good chance there could be something. It's the problematic is that sometimes the stories can lead you away as opposed to lead you to it. But as technology advances, I mean, we now know that it's all about money at the end of the day. And if you have enough money, you can get ground-penetrating satellite systems which can pick out anything from 10 feet underneath the ground, with anything of interest. I mean, people sit back and don't realise that the topography of the oceans of the Earth, where certain things are on the bottom of the ocean. So if it really goes to such length, you could pretty much find most stuff, I suppose, if you've got the technology to do that now. But it's what's available to the general folk. And I think as time goes on, we're going to be starting to see a trickle feed of more technology coming forward, which scans in a different way, which looks and monitors in a different way, utilizing pieces of software, and even utilizing and tapping into satellites in orbit, because these things are available now. We can tap in to environmental anomalies and geomagnetic anomalies and all sorts of different things by the use of satellites which are in orbit. Never forget, we have the access to do that over the internet, and that sometimes can be very rewarding when localizing on an area of, say, 60 feet and trying to work out, is there something unusual in that area? I mean, is this small geological phenomenon? Is there something built there which is has a consistency of some form of large structured metal under the ground up to 10 feet deep? I mean, we have these things at our fingertips now. It's just a matter of learning them and finding where they are and how to access them.
Well, one of the good things that we've found in the UK in the metal detecting industry is LiDAR, and that's been exceptional for people and research purposes. Obviously, the satellites and what have you. Let me remind what's the sign for. It's basically pulsed laser lights that are measuring the reflected pulses of the sensors. There's websites available for free access for information, so you can actually go and visit the site in relation to the site that you're visiting, metal detecting. Excuse me, to see potentially any structures below the surface, i.e., remnants and what have you. And it's absolutely fantastic. Some of the mounds and such like that have been found with this is fantastic. So the technology is moving on. I mean, I know, Steve, that you don't know much about metal detecting per se, and the technologies that are currently becoming available. The multi-frequency machines, for instance, am I right, Mike?
Yes.
Or something else in what they're able to do in relation to things that a couple of years ago could do. Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is incredible what we can do now. I mean, we're utilising satellites ourselves in a long-term study called Project Doorway, which involves ancient sites around the world, and we can look at the topography, we can look at the geography and the geology of that location through satellites now, right down to the meter. And we can go to certain locations where we believe there are anomalistic phenomena there taking place simply because of following the clues. Because it would seem the ancients had a way of tapping into this source, just like Lays. They had a knowledge of certain locations where they built certain buildings. Those buildings might not exist anymore, but it leaves a remnants behind in these satellite images where you can go to those locations and you can map it and you can test it and you can scan it. And sometimes people are finding some tremendous things. And they're utilising the technology that's currently available. It's a very exciting time, actually, at the moment.
Certainly is. Anyway, moving on. I wanted to briefly give mention to your work with Eric von Daniken. Obviously, when the archaeology and metal detecting, well, not long after our founding, we supported quite a big event that he'd done, his first visit to the UK and lecturing for many years.
Yes, that was 27 years he hadn't been to the country, and we brought him to the BAFTA Theatre in London's Princess Anne Theatre to have a special event there for the 50th anniversary of the Chariots of the Gods. Now, that book is probably the biggest selling book in the world, 73 or 74 coming on to now, million copies in, I believe, around about 50 countries. Incredible book, and it's an incredible legacy he's had, and he's still, even now at the age of 82 years of age almost. I know Eric very well, he's a very good friend, and he still has that passion and the drive even now. And to be honest with you, he'll do nothing less than travel the world still and still conduct research. He's still at it as we speak. And he's got a new book coming out in October, and there's more information, more fascinating information coming forward as time goes on. And of course, Eric's aware of the development of technology now. I mean, back in the day, he was laughed at, and it was very hard for people to swallow. But it was a fascinating subject, and the book did very, very well. And we brought him for the 50th anniversary to London, and he was awarded the Stellar Citizen Award, which is a special lifetime achievement award for the work that he's done in this subject. It's for people who have changed the way we think, and Eric is exactly one of those. Despite what you might read or whatever, he continues to plough his time and efforts and his life into this research. And we wanted to celebrate that, and it's been successful, very successful, to the point where there is now going to be a Chariots of the Gods theme park, and possibly a number of things in the media, which I'm not allowed to talk about, which will be coming over the next couple of years, which is absolutely fascinating and very exciting. And only today I've been in big conversations in Blackpool about the development of Chariots of the Gods theme park. It's something special. It's out of this world, and some of the technology that is being brought to this theme park has never been seen before by people. It's quite incredible, and it's going to offer people the insight of education into the world of mysteries. There's still much more out there. There's still things that people haven't found, believe it or not. Humans only occupy. They say that we're overpopulated the earth. Well, no, we don't. We don't overpopulate the earth. We just overpopulate the cities, because there's so much of this planet which is not, humans have never even trodden. And you know what? There's so many probably things out there which are still out there to discover. So we're hoping that the legacy continues with his work. I know there are a number of other people which are involved in this type of subject, and we encourage the fact that people are going to go out there, can carry on the research, carry on searching for items, things that are hidden beneath our soil that we walk on, without a clue. And find more discoveries. And these things lead to historical findings which back up historical documentation and events, which is really fascinating, because it's not just a story anymore you're reading. When you start to find the artifacts associated to those stories, and it's absolutely fascinating. And Eric, of course, we hope to have him back in the country next year, and I'm sure people will be fascinated to find out about his latest findings.
We're very lucky, the Archaeology and Metal Detecting magazine, Mike, from doing the initial promotion for the event. We've got access to some back catalogue articles of Eric von Daniken's, which we can produce on the website. So again, that's something else that will be going up in the near future, as with other information like Steve's articles and such like. Something that I've not told many people. Steve knows all about it because we tried to follow up on it a number of years ago. A friend of my wife, her father was in the British Army, and they were sent to South America. Now, don't quote me; it was quite some time ago. It was Ecuador. They had to go to Ecuador, and on their mission was actually Neil Armstrong, the man who landed on the moon. Now, Neil Armstrong, if you can check this yourself, he did go on some form of exploration to Ecuador with a British Army. I can't remember the finer details of that. But this person's father, who was there, claims to have seen numerous items of gold being removed from a chamber in a certain cave system. Now, interestingly, of all the information I've done, and I've got a friend who is an archaeologist specialising in South American history and such like. A book, one of the books by Eric von Daniken, does actually give note to this story from a different perspective. So it was backed up by. Now, obviously, what I'm trying to say is a lot of people, including myself, don't believe Eric von Daniken is always correct. There's suggestions about things that have been made up or things have been hoaxed, etc., etc. That hasn't been proven a lot as far as I'm concerned. But to have a story secondhand from the daughter of the person who was there, giving me the information regarding people who were actually at the site, and then having a book by Eric von Daniken have the exact information, well, not exact, from a different perspective, information in, does actually add to the whole Eric von Daniken history.
Yeah, he does, yeah. I mean, it was always questionable.
For me, anyway.
It was always questionable for Eric back then because he had no other resource of material, no internet around. Nobody else was conducting research and pushing it out. He was on his own when he first started, and he had nothing else to fall on but his own theories and ideas. What we are finding now is that some of those things were actually very much correct. Eric, in his younger days, talked about Amazonian cities, lost cities. And it was only last year I was sent satellite photographs of large buildings in the Amazon jungle, which I have to say are most definitely pyramidal type structures, which have overgrown with trees and plants, but they are definitely there. Now, the problem of this, and you find it very, very difficult to understand, but these places people haven't even got to yet because of the traversity of the forest is so dangerous and so difficult that they've been remained secret for such a long time. I'll give you a typical example. When the Japanese, many years ago, I think it was around about the 1930s, said there was a strange creature living up in the jungles, and it was a black and white type bear, and we was renowned, as we know, as the panda. Now, sightings occasionally happened, and this is an animal that moves very slowly. It's black and white and lives in a forest of green. It only eats one type of food, and yet it took 35 years to find the next one. Because it's not that they're hyper-invasive, it's because of the way they live. They're living in locations that we just find it so very difficult to traverse. The swamps, the insects, the dangerous creatures, and just the topography of the land makes it very, very difficult to find. And I've seen satellite photographs of these, and they are there. They are there in the middle of the Amazon jungle. But the thing is that there's been expeditions many times and failed over the years because of disease, because of illness, because of dangers, and they've just never managed to do so. However, whoever's got enough guts and enough money could probably pull it off. There is lots of things, I believe, still in the Amazon jungle. It wasn't always a jungle, you have to consider. Going back thousands and thousands of years, the terrain would have been significantly different. There's probably lots of things out there which are still sat there ready to be discovered. And I think it's down to us to try and, work out how we manage to do that, because we've become so used to living in a society where we don't have to be challenged by the traverse of land. It's quite simple for us now, and we've lost that thread. We've lost that track, of how to manage in those societies. And it is very difficult and it's very challenging, but I'm sure there are things out there. And as Eric said in his early days, there are lost Amazonian cities which are still not being discovered. And it would seem by satellites now that is actually correct.
Yes, absolutely.
There's probably a lot more to be discovered out there yet.
Mm-hmm. I thought for a second you were leading into Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Talking about
that's interesting.
I think that one would actually deserve a show on its own, Mike. Trust me.
Right. I'm open to the possibility, and a lot of people will say, one's never been found, or this and that, or bones. My thing for that is I grew up hunting and fishing in Ohio, and we're not talking, where I grew up was a lot of farmland with patches of woods and stuff, and we knew that there were coyotes. You could even hear coyotes, but I think I was almost 30 before I ever saw a coyote. And we're not talking vast, wooded area, it's mostly farmland. And so I think let's take Bigfoot out of it, but I think that there could be things still that we don't know of in some of these areas. The population of coyotes has grown substantially now where I grew up, and it's pretty common to see them, but their numbers have obviously gone up. But all the hours I spent in the woods, when I was a kid, I never saw them. Just like deer. My dad used to deer hunt when he was a kid, and deer were not very big in Ohio because there were more coyotes and stuff, and that changed. But now they're overpopulated. You can drive 50 miles on the highway and see 20 of them hit by cars. When my dad was young, you didn't see him. He never saw deer in the woods. So I think small populations and heavily wooded, more treacherous terrain. Who knows? Who knows what's out there?
It could be just that we're dealing with a very hyper-elusive animal, very intelligent, hyper-elusive. So, it's instinctually wants to keep out of sight, stay away from being seen. We're still finding discoveries of animals we didn't even think existed anymore.
Right.
Such as the coelacanth fish, for one of them. This thing was supposed to have gone extinct 60 million years ago. Yet they're alive and well and breathing. There's probably a lot of things out there that we just haven't found. We know very little about planet Earth, believe it or not. And we probably know more about the stars than we do of our own planet, to be honest.
Yep.
Mike, I think there's a potential for Steve to come onto the All Metal Mode podcast itself, obviously discussing the Peruvian stuff and the metal detecting at Roswell and such like. I think the American listeners would eat it up, to be honest.
Yeah, the only difference, the only issue I would love to have you on, the U.S. shows, the only thing is it'd be about, we're 6 hours different. You guys are 6 hours later. We do the show at 8 p.m. Eastern. Yeah, that's like 2 a.m. your time.
Well, I have done that quite a few times, Mike.
If you're up for it, then I would love to have you on sometime in the very near future. That would be amazing.
I do a lot of radio work in the early hours of the morning for the US live shows and things, so I'm used to it. I'd love to. That'd be great.
Oh,
I'll have to hook you up on Facebook as well, Mike.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. I think we're getting to the end here, guys. I'll tell you what, I am turning into a sweaty mess. It was nice and cool when I started. I thought, should I turn the air on or not? No, it's so nice in here. It is getting warm. My room that I do the podcast on is getting warm. So let's. I definitely there's one question left, Dave, that you wanted to talk about, and I got to hear about this because I don't know anything about this either.
Well, Steve touched on earlier about the resonance chambers. Obviously, the rooms where potential healing took place, maybe in the past. And basically, my last question, therefore, would be: have there been any similar discovered in the UK, Steve?
There is in Scotland. We found some in Scotland, the Highlands of Scotland, Ireland, Scotland were very prominent with these. I haven't actually discovered any other resonant chambers, but, however, apart from that, there does seem to be ones where there were dwellings, which could have been, should we say. We're looking at the prospects of how it was actually built. I mean, it's very difficult when you're just looking at a little bit of rubble on the ground. Because over the years it's just been demolished, and civilizations have come along and utilized parts of the stone for other buildings and so on and so forth. But sometimes there is a reason why they build these places in these locations, and that's the clue: is following the geological paths, like lays throughout the UK. I mean, we've talked heavily about lays and phenomena and buildings on these locations, Dave. But what people were tending to do, 25 years ago, is stop at the sea. You came to the coast, you followed the line, you came to the coast and stopped and mapped to the UK. However, I believe those lines carry on. You follow those lines, they'll meet up. I mean, there seems to be what you might refer to as an Earth grid of lays covering the whole planet and the interjunctions. And if you do this and map this, you'll find that even the Giza Plateau and Stonehenge are on the same places, these same locations where they were purpose-built. And that's a knowledge, and that's a clue. And if we can go to those locations, it doesn't necessarily mean we can see a building there anymore, but they may have been. And that might give us clues to locations where we can go, find out, we can take equipment, we can start looking and seeing if there is anything around to sustain a civilization, because these places were built around societies. They were utilizing these locations. And societies leave clues behind. Even if they're 10 feet under the ground, they leave clues behind. And I think that's one thing we can do. We can do it the other way around. Rather than going out there and just looking for these items, we can start to look at the geology of the land, working out where these places were and saying, okay, well, if there's one there may have been one here, and going to those locations and doing some tests there. I think that's a good way forward, to be honest.
Oh, that's interesting. I have a few questions before we wrap up, and I'm sure Dave will too. Another question I have for you is, I don't want to put his name out there. I don't want to throw him under the bus at all. But Luke Higgins and I, like that. Luke Higgins and I were talking about the pyramids. They're found all over the world, and I said, from that, I kind of feel like that the ancient people communicated somehow. I think we don't give them enough credit. And Luke's theory is even kids, if you give them blocks, they'll build pyramids. But I get what he's saying, and I, of course, I'm making a joke of it. I'm not saying I think he's got a very good idea. Do you think that it's more the case that it's just a natural thing to do, or do you think that there was some kind of communication going on?
Well, it's a very good question, and it's very current, actually, because we've been doing a lot of research into this over the last few years. And what we're kind of coming across is that we've got to consider that the ancients thought differently and communicated differently. They were very much conscious type beings, more so than we are today. I mean, scientists have come forward now and said by the year 2050, we should be able to consciously tap into each other's minds telepathically. Tests have been carried out last year where students in India said hello, not by text, not by writing, not by verbal. It was done by brain-to-brain communication in LA, and it works. And it's been proven scientifically that we are evolving as a species. Or are we? Or are we going back to the roots of where we came from? That's a good theory, because it would seem that impossibility of that maybe the ancients had this survival instinct. We don't need it anymore. We can just go to the shops once a week and survive. We don't need the survival sense anymore. And that survival sense came in handy in numerous different ways. We had the feeling of being watched because predators were around in them days, and it was a necessity to have that survival sense, as well as many other things which acutely we might refer to as clairaudience or clairvoyance and things like that, or telepathy. We have all these wonderful scientific names for these. But the bottom line is, they may have all been survival senses, and we might be going back to the roots. We might be slowly not evolving in that sense, but devolving in our sense, in the speaking, because we've got a lot of brain capacity that we're not using. And maybe that we are just going back to evolving in such a way that we're going back to the way we used to be, because people are becoming more consciously aware about things around them, the society, spiritually, you could name it. Now, maybe the ancestors did the same thing. We know from studies that the Egyptians, the pyramids, one of the pyramids on the Giza Plateau isn't complete. I argue the point, it is complete, because these things are tuned by frequency. When you go into the pyramids, the one that's not completed is tuned to the same frequencies as the others. I believe it wasn't completed because they already achieved the frequency they needed. By adding it and completing it, it would have shifted it off its frequency. These things, I believe, were areas where they could tap into the source. It could be consciousness, spiritual. I mean, take in consideration, the Egyptians were fascinated with death. They were fascinated. Everything, they lived their lives for death, to be honest with you. The concept of it, the other life after the life after death, it became so much so in society, they lived by it. Now, what fascinates me is that maybe these locations, they had an open source of information. They could tap the source. These areas they could spiritually lift their consciousness. They could communicate maybe with the past and people that they'd lost before, into the tapping into a world of knowledge that was spread around. It is global. I have to say, the pyramid structures are global, but they are all attuned. Frequency is definitely involved in these locations and the manufacture. As to what they were actually doing, it's difficult, because we're dealing with society that isn't here anymore, and how they actually lived, how they actually thought, and their consciousness works, we do not know. They might have looked like us, but certainly might have not acted like us. And we have to take that into consideration. And I think some of these places, is the evidence that's left behind, is that we have to start looking as that, could these buildings have somehow been manufactured to the purpose for communications and consciousness and spirituality? I think we would probably have to lead into that area, because, like I say, if we put a modern slant of our theories and thinking on this, I don't think we'll come up with the answers, to be honest with you, because that's modern day thinking. Have to go back in time to figure out how they were doing it. One thing is for sure, whatever it did, it worked, because it was global, and every society was doing the same thing. It was very, very significant for the use on a daily basis, these pyramids. But it is always argumentable that the pyramids are actually older than the Egyptians, that the Egyptians came along and inherited the actual. And that's a whole other debate we'll have to get into sometime.
Something I have found very interesting. I metal detect because of my love of history and the unknown. I mean, I know this isn't our typical kind of show. I could listen to you for hours and hours and hours. If you hear me yawn, my son hasn't been sleeping, but you have my full attention, and I apologize. But
that's okay, Mike.
Something I have found fascinating is, many years back, and it was in the United States. It was northern United States. I want to say it was Ohio or Michigan. A person found in a gravel pit that they were digging out something Egyptian. And of course that could have traveled in modern times, but there's been things that have been found out of place that often make you wonder. There's been rumors. Well, my co-host on Monday night, she found, I believe it was a Roman coin on a Florida beach. There's rumors of pots of them being found on Roman coins, and pots being found on the beaches and stuff. So I tend to think, you know,
it is.
Hey,
it's ignorance, Mike. It's ignorance
Yeah.
and the history, because we thought modern man, you know, as we perceive to be modern man, would have only had the capabilities of traversing the oceans of the earth, and that the earth was in fact round and not flat.
right.
Now, the history will have it is that was modern man who was doing that and discovered that, but it's absolutely wrong. With enough evidence to support that, societies from all over this world were doing transatlantic, trans-Pacific, oceanic graphing. They were going across the oceans. They were trading routes all over this planet. We know that the Egyptian mummies had cocaine in them. They even came from South America. We know that they were trading against the Americans. We know that the Vikings travelled a lot further than they thought. The Romans travelled a lot further than they thought. Yeah, but the problem is to go back and start changing all that history is an immense undertaking, and a problematic that will occur with that, because we're going to end up with areas of unknowns. So what do they do when you come across an area of unknown? Well, it's like filling a road up when there's a hole in it. They come across and they fill it up with a little bit of tarmac, and that modern tarmac sits in there in an old road. This is what happens because these areas of grey are filled up with absolute rubbish, to be honest with you. We know very little about the amazing achievements that the ancient civilization in this world had. And one of those which was trans-Pacific and transatlantic crossings on a world basis for trading routes.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I think. You know, I think it's kind of almost absurd to think of what these ancient people were building and doing, and to think that they couldn't cross the ocean. I mean, that's just my opinion, and I could be way off. But that's my thought on it. You know, I've watched shows and read books and stuff on South America, some of these civilizations where they had these irrigation systems and everything. I mean, they just had, you know, although different looking than our society, very modern, very just incredible ingenuity and stuff. But you know, they were stuck there. They couldn't travel the oceans. I find that really hard to believe personally.
I mean, we know that it doesn't take a lot. I mean, there was the Kon-Tiki expedition that took place, and I think that was one about 1930s. But it proved the fact that man could travel to Easter Island on a just basically a wood raft. That's all they had. And they traversed thousands of miles of ocean and did it. And they actually taught that. You know, and that's with the knowledge that they had. But the ancients had knowledge of the seas. You know, they lived it, they worked it. They were very aware of currents and times and the best time when to go. These trading routes were set up not just by accident, but over a period of hundreds of years of failed attempts to get it right. And they did. And even in ancient times, they had maps, which we're finding, which are very, very precise in how they've been mapped. People thought, how did he do it? Well, the only way to do it is to travel around land and map it. That's the only way. Then. They're very clever. Very cleverly.
Absolutely. I've got to give Dave some time, but I've got one last question. I bet Dave's sitting there with he's probably tapping a toe or something, just waiting to jump in.
Mate, you don't realise how long me and Steve have known each other. I'm fine.
Okay. We've talked about a lot of things this evening. Is there one subject, and maybe I'm curious if there's one small field in that subject that's really close to your heart?
Absolutely. And this is something we can share with our listeners. And actually, they can get a little bit more involved in this because it's absolutely fascinating new research. There's a number of satellites which are in orbit. One of them is the electromagnetic anomaly satellite. It looks at the electromagnetic anomaly and graphs it over your Google Earth. It's known as EAMG2, and there is a version 3 of that. It's EAMG2. You can download this little KRB file now. And when you download it, you click on it, it opens up in Google Earth, and it allows the satellite system to map the globe for anomalies. When you actually focus, and you can just use it as normal Google Earth, go straight down to a very small location, you can start to map where anomalies are. There's also a geological one. What we're finding is things referred to as electron diffused regions. This is a scientific name. It's been announced by NASA 4 years ago, which went very hidden, to be honest with you. It should have been a major announcement, but it didn't. It was on the back pages somewhere, locked away. But they sent 4 satellites up into orbit to monitor these. And there's certainly a lot of things happening over the last 12 months, including the polar shift, the magnetic polar shift.
Right.
It's leaning more towards Siberia. You may have heard about this now. But it's revealing new anomalies. And these anomalies, what we've found is that they're closely associated with ancient sites. And it's absolutely fascinating, the research that we're looking into at the moment. But people can go out there. They can get Google Earth free to download on their laptops and computers. They can look for this little KRV file. There's 2 of them. There's an Earth magnetic anomaly overgraphing, and there's also a gravitational anomaly satellite graphing as well. And when you combine those 2, you start to come across hot points. And these hot points, we've been going to on location into different countries, and we have discovered some things which we thought, this is very interesting, because it would seem the ancients had the capabilities of being able to build or once build ancient sites on these locations. And it's given us clues where people haven't gone before, and maybe be able to find new things. And it's a new form of research. It's called Project Doorway that we're actually working on over the last 3 years. Just utilising the technology, the new technology that we have, by simply just tapping the source of the satellites, which you can get, you can use them for free, and just apply that filter to Google Earth, and it can start to reveal some numerous things which are quite interesting, quite wondrous.
Wow. Now, EAMG2, correct?
Yes, EAMG2, and you want version 3, and when you download that free little KRV file, you'll place the little icon on your desktop. All you need to do is double-click that. It automatically opens up in Google Earth. And it'll appear on the left-hand side as you all the other little tick boxes, such as showing streets and roads. You can untick them or tick them. There'll be one there for EMAG2. You can click it on and click it off. And you can just utilize it for mapping where you want to, anywhere on the Earth. And it's surprising.
Where can you actually get this, Steve? Because all I'm finding is about electronic pig movements.
If you type in onto Google search, such as Google Earth, and then look for EMAG2 version 3, which is a V3, and you'll find a number of websites, and you'll have the opportunity to download that KRV file. It's the same for the gravitational anomaly. You can download that and apply it to the...
Right, got you now.
There it is.
I was searching for EAMG alone.
Amazing. Now, make sure it's version 3, guys. Make sure it's version 3, because the older ones, they didn't work. And what we've found is, this is where it starts getting very interesting. We knew that certain countries were doing geological surveys and maybe even a little bit more in certain areas. And what they did is they had the government black out certain areas where they were conducting research on ancient sites. And we were asking questions, why is this area blacked out? It's because they didn't want people to work out exactly where new discoveries are being made and things are being found of precious nature. This is actually going on around, especially in Ethiopia. There's a large area in Ethiopia where a lot of work like this at ancient sites has been going on. And they're utilising the same source. But it is available for the general public to use. I say use it while we can, while it's available for free. Because we have been utilising it for the last 3 years, and we're finding lots and lots of discoveries, fascinating discoveries, and they do tie in with the general aspect that the ancients had knowledge of where to build these locations, and were utilising, tapping a source of some kind. And it's absolutely fascinating.
Certainly sounds it, and I will be having a look for it as well.
I've got it downloaded. I'm opening it.
Look at you.
Oh, I'm excited. Yeah, that's really, really interesting. Great stuff. Dave, do you got anything you want to?
No, obviously, I'd just like to thank Steve for this evening. And I think, if I'm not wrong, next week we have John Massey, or is it Jason Massey? I apologise if you've got your name wrong there. From Veterans Metal Detectoring. So he's going to be coming on and talking basically about ex-forces personnel who are taking part in metal detecting and such like to help them thereafter being in the army and whatnot. We'll get a lot more information on that, and obviously we'll be speak at length next week with himself and a few of the veterans as well, I think.
It's Jason, just to clarify. Jason. I think that's what you.
Yeah, sorry, I've got John written in my diary for some reason, so that's what confused me. So there's next week's show, and obviously I'd like to definitely again thank Steve a lot for coming on. I know how busy you are, Steve. So
thank you. No, it's been an absolute
pleasure. Taking the time.
Steve, I'll get a hold of you soon. I would like to discuss if you're up for it. Doing the United States show as well.
Absolutely, guys. Yeah, no problem. Just let me know. Get in contact. I mean, of course, I know I'm over in the States actually in February. I'm doing a tour of lectures throughout LA. And this is a problem when I travel over there. Everybody wants me once I'm there because, I'm already there. You don't have to pay me flight ticket. So what happens is everybody says, he's here, quick, get him. And of course, it's turned into a bit of a tour throughout LA and Arizona and so on and so forth. But I will be back beginning of March. I'll be available for any shows then, so I look forward to you getting in touch.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. We'll get in touch soon. And again, thank you so much. I had a blast, and I know Dave did. I've really been looking forward to this, and I know it's not our typical metal detecting. We will get back on talking metal detectors.
Well, we have touched on it nonetheless. We've been able to touch on it a few times.
Absolutely, we did.
And that's what it's about, Mike. Again, passing the information out to all and sundry. And again, tonight's show has been filled with information that previously, I mean, obviously, me and Steve have not spoke like we used to because he's so busy and I'm so busy. But the information that he's come across tonight is opened my eyes to a lot of areas.
Absolutely.
And I know also, without a doubt, Mr. Higgins will be buzzing off it as well.
For sure, absolutely. Okay, guys, let's wrap it up. Steve, again, thank you so much. Dave.
Thank you very much, guys, for having me on. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thanks very much, Dave. Take care.
Okay, and I'll be in contact, guys. I look forward to hearing from you.
Absolutely. Cheers, thank you, guys.
Cheers again.
All right, so there we have it, and I had a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know it's a little different. We're not going to do different often, but boy, I think if we're going to do different, Steve was the guy to have on, and hope you guys appreciated it, enjoyed it. Hope I didn't upset too many people by doing that, but again, we'll be right back on track next week and following weeks talking metal detecting. So thanks all for tuning in, and have a good night.